I never imagined that at 74 I would be staring at the most shocking betrayal of my life, and it would come from my own family. My name is Richard Hayes, and I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood of Maplewood, New Jersey. For over 40 years, I've poured my heart and soul into building my home, a sprawling, 4-story mansion worth over $4.5 million. Every brick, every window, every piece of furniture has a story, a memory attached to it. But today, it seems none of that matters. The day started like any other. I had just finished my morning coffee in my sunlit kitchen, the aroma of roasted beans filling the room. My golden retriever, Max, wagged his tail beside me, oblivious to the storm about to descend. The sunlight streamed through the windows, casting long shadows on the hardwood floor. Outside, the autumn leaves danced in the crisp morning breeze, painting a picture of peace and serenity. And yet, that calm was about to shatter. I heard the front door creak open, and before I could even call out, there they were. My son Ethan Hayes, a prominent neurosurgeon, and his wife, Clara Hayes, a high-powered corporate lawyer. Their expressions were not warm, not friendly. They were cold, calculated, and determined. I knew something was wrong the moment I saw them. "Good morning, Dad," Ethan said, his tone unusually stiff. Clara, ever the picture of control, stood beside him with her arms crossed, a faint smirk playing on her lips. "Morning," I replied cautiously, sensing the tension in the air. "What brings you here so early?" Clara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped forward, her heels clicking ominously against the polished floor. "Richard," she began, her voice calm but sharp, "we need to discuss your living arrangements and your future." I frowned, trying to make sense of her words. "My future? What do you mean?" Ethan cleared his throat, his jaw tight. "Dad, we've been patient, but it's time for you to make a decision. We need you to sign over the house." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Sign over what?" I managed to sputter. "You're talking about my home, my house?" Clara nodded. "Yes, the house. It's not just about the property, Dad. We're concerned about your ability to manage your affairs. We don't think you're fully competent to handle such a large estate anymore." I stared at them, disbelief mingling with a simmering anger. "Are you serious? You're saying that if I don't sign over my home, you'll declare me incompetent?" Ethan's eyes softened for a fraction of a second, but only slightly. "Dad, we don't want to do this, but you have to understand, we're trying to protect you. The process, it's just legal formalities. If you refuse, we'll have no choice but to involve a conservator and the court." I set my coffee down, my hands trembling, not from fear, but from the rage boiling inside me. Protect me? From what? From living in my own house? From making decisions about my life? You think you can just waltz in and take what's mine? Clara leaned in, her voice icy. "It's not about taking, Dad. It's about ensuring that you don't make mistakes that could jeopardize your future. We've seen it, haven't we? The unpaid bills, the missed appointments, the forgotten deadlines." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "You're painting a picture that doesn't exist. Yes, I may forget a few things here and there, but I am perfectly capable of managing my affairs. This house, this life, it's mine. And no threat from either of you will change that." Ethan stepped forward, placing a hand gently on my shoulder. "Dad, we're only thinking of you. The house is valuable, immensely valuable. We just want to make sure it's in safe hands. That's all." Safe hands. My blood boiled. They wanted it in their hands, not mine. I could feel my heart racing, but I forced myself to smile. Yes, smile. Because beneath that smile was a mind sharp as ever, and I knew exactly what I was going to do. "All right," I said slowly, savoring each word. "I'll meet with you. We can discuss this arrangement." They exchanged a glance, surprised by my calm demeanor. Clara's smirk faltered for a moment. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You agree to meet?" I nodded. "Yes, let's meet. But understand this, I am not signing anything today. I want to hear your reasoning. I want transparency. And I want to see all the legal documentation you claim to have." Clara's lips pressed into a thin line. "We'll provide everything, of course. But you need to understand the seriousness of this, Dad. If you resist, we will proceed." I waved them off lightly, still smiling. "I hear you. And I look forward to this meeting." After they left, I sat back in my chair, the adrenaline still coursing through me. I knew this was just the beginning. They thought they could intimidate me with threats, with legal jargon, with the prestige of their professions. But they underestimated me. I've lived through far worse. And if they thought I was going to give up my home without a fight, well, they were in for a surprise. I walked through the house, touching the walls, the railings, the furniture. Each item reminded me of my life's work, my memories, my victories, and yes, even my mistakes. This house was more than just bricks and mortar. It was a testament to my life, my perseverance, my dreams. And no one, not even my own son and daughter-in-law, would take that away from me. As I sat down to make some notes, I thought about how I would approach the meeting. I needed a strategy, a way to protect myself without giving away any advantage. They had assumed they were in control, but control was an illusion. I had lived long enough to understand that. I also realized I needed allies, people who could help me navigate this legal storm. Friends, old colleagues, maybe even some contacts in law enforcement who owed me favors. I couldn't rely on Ethan and Clara to have my best interests at heart. They wanted the house, plain and simple. The hours passed, and night fell over Maplewood. The mansion, usually a comforting sanctuary, felt oppressive, almost hostile. I made my way to the study, a place where I had spent countless hours reading, writing, and planning. Sitting there, surrounded by shelves lined with books, I felt a renewed sense of determination. Tomorrow, the meeting would take place. I didn't know exactly how they would try to pressure me, but I knew one thing: I would not be bullied. I would not be coerced. And above all, I would protect what was rightfully mine. The night was quiet, but sleep eluded me. Every creak of the house, every whisper of the wind outside the windows, felt like a prelude to the battle that lay ahead. I closed my eyes, visualizing the meeting. I imagined Clara's sharp tongue, Ethan's calm reasoning, and how I would counter them, word by word, argument by argument. By the time the first light of dawn broke over Maplewood, I had a plan. Not just any plan, but a strategy to ensure that the house, and my dignity, remained untouched. And so, with the first rays of the sun illuminating my living room, I smiled. Not out of fear, not out of submission, but out of defiance. Let them come. Let them threaten. Let them plot. I was ready. Because this was my home, my life, and I would not let anyone, not even my own blood, take it away. The morning of the meeting arrived with an unsettling stillness. The air in Maplewood was crisp, tinged with the faint scent of pine from the surrounding trees. The golden sunlight streamed through the massive windows of my mansion, highlighting the elegance of my home, my sanctuary, my fortress. Today, that fortress would be tested. I dressed carefully, not in anything ostentatious, but in a simple yet dignified way. A tailored gray blazer, crisp white shirt, and my favorite navy slacks. Appearance mattered, not because I wanted to impress them, but because I wanted to show them I was still in control. I was Richard Hayes, wealthy, respected, and perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. Ethan and Clara arrived promptly at 10 a.m., just as I had anticipated. They entered the grand foyer, their expressions unreadable but sharp, like hawks circling prey. Clara's heels clicked purposefully against the marble floor, and Ethan followed closely behind, carrying a leather-bound folder, likely filled with legal documents meant to intimidate me. "Good morning, Dad," Ethan said, his voice calm but tight, as if holding back a storm. Clara offered her practiced smile, which I could see through immediately. "Good morning," I replied evenly, motioning for them to sit in the study. "Please, make yourselves comfortable." They exchanged a glance, then sat down across from me. Clara opened her folder with deliberate precision, her fingernails tapping softly against the leather. Ethan remained silent, watching me, observing, waiting for me to make the first move. "Dad," Clara began, her tone cold and measured, "we don't want this to be confrontational. We're simply here to discuss your future and ensure your affairs are handled responsibly. The house, as you know, is a substantial asset, one that requires careful management." I nodded slowly. "I understand your concern. Truly, I do. But I also know my own mind and my own capabilities. Let's be clear, this house, this estate, belongs to me. And I intend to keep it that way. Clara's smile didn't falter. We understand, Dad. But we've observed some patterns. Some decisions that suggest you might not be in the best position to manage everything independently. For example, the recent investments you made in that new tech startup, you didn't consult anyone, and the risk was substantial. I leaned back in my chair, letting her words hang in the air. I made those investments carefully. I've done my research. Just because I didn't run every decision past you two doesn't mean I'm incompetent. I am fully capable of evaluating risks, making choices, and managing my wealth. Ethan finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. Dad, it's not just about finances. It's about health, too. We've noticed some forgetfulness, missed appointments. These are signs, small as they may seem, that point to larger issues. You're not the man you were 30 years ago. We only want to help. I could feel the subtle manipulation, the emotional leverage they were trying to exert. But I was ready. I leaned forward, my fingers steepled. So your solution is to take my house, my freedom, and my dignity? Is that really help, Ethan? Or is it convenience? You want to control my life so you don't have to deal with the challenges of respecting my autonomy. Clara's eyes narrowed. Richard, you misunderstand. This isn't about control. It's about protection. There are legal mechanisms in place to ensure your estate is secure. If you refuse to cooperate, we will pursue a conservatorship. That's just the reality. I smiled, carefully, deliberately. Ah, the famous conservatorship. A legal trap, dressed as concern. You think that by invoking legal threats, you can bully me into submission. But I've lived long enough to know the difference between genuine care and greed disguised as protection. Ethan's jaw tightened. Dad, please. Don't make this personal. We're only trying to protect you. I stood, walking slowly around the room, letting my presence dominate the space. Protect me? From what? From living in my own home? From making my own choices? I've survived wars, recessions, and betrayal from people I trusted. And now, at 74, I'm supposed to cower because my son and his wife deem me incompetent? Clara's hands clenched slightly. Richard, the house isn't just sentimental. It's an asset that could be jeopardized. We've prepared documents outlining the legal path forward. Signing them voluntarily would be the best course for everyone. I paused, turning to face them. Documents. Legal papers. You think these pieces of paper can intimidate me? They can't. I will review them, certainly, but signing over my life without a fight? That will never happen. Ethan spoke more softly, almost pleading. Dad, please. Think of the stress this could save. Think of the peace of mind. I laughed lightly, the sound echoing in the room. Peace of mind? Let me tell you something, Ethan. Peace of mind isn't giving away your life. Peace of mind is living fully, making your own choices, and protecting your legacy, not letting others dictate it for you. Clara leaned forward, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Richard, you don't have to do this alone. Think about what could happen if something were to go wrong. Legal battles, medical issues, financial mistakes. We're offering a solution that's simple, clean, and safe. I raised an eyebrow. Simple, clean, and safe? That's rich, coming from the people who are threatening to declare me incompetent. You're offering me safety by stripping away my rights. That's not safety, Clara. That's theft with a smile. Ethan shifted in his chair. Dad, we don't want to fight. We just want to avoid complications. Please, consider what's best. I took a deep breath, letting their words wash over me. I could feel the tension, the calculated pressure, but I had anticipated it. I had spent hours thinking, strategizing, preparing. They thought they had leverage, but I was 2 steps ahead. Here's what will happen, I said, my voice steady and commanding. I will review your documents. I will consult my advisors. And I will make my decision based on my own judgment, not your threats, not your insinuations, and certainly not your so-called concern. I am capable, I am informed, and I am not intimidated. Clara's smile flickered, just for a moment. Ethan's expression tightened. But I held their gaze, unwavering. The meeting is over for now. We will reconvene once I have all the information I need. Until then, I suggest you reflect on what true protection really means. They stood, Clara gathering her folder with precise movements, Ethan glancing at me one last time. "We'll be in touch, Dad," Ethan said, his voice quieter than before, tinged with something that might have been frustration or respect. I nodded. "I look forward to it. And remember, this house is not just walls and furniture. It's my life. Do not forget that." After they left, I walked through the mansion, feeling a mix of triumph and caution. They had expected fear, submission, maybe even tears. Instead, I had met them with composure, wit, and authority. But I knew this was only the beginning. The documents they had brought would be scrutinized, dissected, and countered. I would need my legal counsel, financial advisors, and perhaps even old allies with knowledge of corporate law. I could not allow any stone to be left unturned. I paused in the hallway, glancing at a photograph on the wall, a younger Ethan, laughing in the backyard, carefree and innocent. And beside him, Clara, smiling at the camera, unaware of the complexities life would throw her way. It was hard not to remember the children they once were, and the people they had become. But sentimentality had no place in this battle. The home was mine, the legacy was mine, and I would defend it with every ounce of strength I had left. As the sun set over Maplewood, casting long shadows through the mansion, I prepared for the coming days. I would meet with my attorney tomorrow. I would review every detail, anticipate every legal maneuver, and plan my counterattack. They had begun the war, but I would dictate its terms. The house was quiet, almost reverent, as if acknowledging the resolve within its walls. I walked through each room, touching the furniture, the photographs, the memories. I whispered to myself, a vow as much as a promise, "They will not take this from me. Not now. Not ever." And with that, I turned off the lights, prepared my notes, and settled in for a night of careful strategy. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin, and I would be ready. The next morning, the first light of dawn barely filtered through the tall maple trees surrounding my estate. The mansion was unusually silent, as if it, too, sensed the tension that had begun to permeate every corner of my life. Today, I had a meeting scheduled with my attorney, Samuel Griffin, a man whose calm intelligence and razor-sharp insight I had relied on for decades. Samuel arrived promptly, his dark suit crisp, his briefcase bulging with files and legal papers. He greeted me warmly, but his eyes betrayed the seriousness of the situation. "Good morning, Richard," he said. "I reviewed the documents Ethan and Clara brought yesterday. They're aggressive, but not insurmountable. I think we have several options." I poured us both a cup of coffee, letting the rich aroma fill the room. "I don't want to just defend my home, Sam. I want them to understand that intimidation won't work. That this house, my life, cannot be taken from me with threats and ultimatums." Samuel nodded. "Exactly. And we can do that. But we have to be meticulous. Their approach is subtle. They're trying to frame this as concern for your well-being, which makes it socially and legally sticky. We need a strategy that protects your property and, just as importantly, your dignity." I leaned back in my chair, considering my options. "So what's the first move?" Samuel opened his briefcase, pulling out a stack of documents. "First, we establish clear evidence of your competency. Financial decisions, daily routines, interactions with people, anything that demonstrates your mental acuity. We'll also need to document your medical history, any recent checkups, and your ability to manage personal and business affairs." I smirked. "So, essentially, we create a dossier proving I'm not a puppet to be manipulated." "That's simple enough." "Simple in concept, yes," Samuel replied, his eyes serious. "But execution is critical. They'll look for any inconsistency, any hint of vulnerability. Even a minor slip could be used against you in court." I nodded, absorbing the gravity of his words. "I see. So we need to anticipate their moves, and not just react." "Exactly," Samuel said. "We also need a psychological component. Ethan is a psychiatrist, Clara a lawyer. Together, they're leveraging both emotional and legal pressure. If we can demonstrate that their tactics are coercive, we strengthen your position. We're not just defending your house, we're defending your autonomy. I leaned forward, gripping the edge of the mahogany desk. Let's start with their ultimatum. Signing over my house under threat of being declared incompetent, that's coercion. Can we frame it that way legally? Samuel nodded. Absolutely. That's a crucial point. We can argue that any attempt to manipulate you into signing over assets under the threat of legal action constitutes undue influence. But we'll need to be very precise in our documentation. I ran a hand through my hair. Then let's get started. What do we need first? Samuel handed me a tablet with a detailed checklist. Daily routines, correspondence, financial records, recent meetings with business partners. Anything that shows you are in full control of your life and decisions. Also, any witnesses willing to attest to your mental clarity and decision-making skills. I spent the next few hours compiling everything. Emails, contracts, medical checkups, investment statements. It was tedious, but necessary. As I worked, my mind kept drifting back to Ethan and Clara. How could they, my own children, believe they had the right to challenge my competence? The thought was infuriating, but it fueled my determination. By late afternoon, Samuel and I sat down with the first set of compiled evidence. "This is solid," he said, scanning the documents. "We can use this to counter any claims they might make. But we also need a proactive approach. We can't just wait for them to act." "What do you suggest?" I asked, curiosity piqued. "We engage a forensic accountant to review the house and your assets. We want a thorough, independent evaluation. Then, we can issue a preemptive legal statement. Any attempt to claim incompetency or seize assets will be met with full scrutiny and resistance. This sets the tone. It shows that you're vigilant and prepared." I nodded. "Good. Let's make sure they understand that this isn't a game. I am not a target to be cornered." As Samuel left for the day, promising to return with updates from the accountant and legal advisors, I found myself walking through the mansion, inspecting every corner. The walls seemed to echo yesterday's confrontation, every room a silent witness to the battle being waged. I thought about my neighbors in Maplewood, who often admired my house but had no idea of the storm brewing within its walls. I imagined Ethan and Clara explaining to friends how they were trying to protect me, and I laughed bitterly. Protection, indeed. They wanted the house, not my welfare. Late that evening, I called an old friend, Margaret Lewis, a retired judge who had been a mentor and confidant for years. I explained the situation briefly, careful not to share unnecessary details, but enough to get her perspective. "Richard," she said after listening, "you're doing everything right. Documentation, legal counsel, independent assessments. This is how you maintain control. But one thing you must remember, emotion is a double-edged sword. Don't let anger dictate your moves. Calm precision will win this." I took a deep breath. Calm precision. Got it. "But I won't lie, Margaret. The betrayal stings." "I understand," she said gently. "It's natural. But the best revenge is maintaining your autonomy. They cannot take that unless you allow it. And from what you've described, you won't." Her words were a balm, reinforcing my resolve. After the call, I returned to my study, reviewing financial statements and planning my next steps. Each page reminded me that this wasn't just a fight over property. It was a struggle to assert that age and familial ties did not equate to weakness. The following day, Samuel arrived with news. The forensic accountant completed the initial review. "Everything is in perfect order. No discrepancies, no mismanagement. Your house, your finances, your assets, they all demonstrate full competence and sound judgment." I allowed myself a small smile. "Excellent. And the legal statement?" "We're drafting it now," Samuel replied. "It will make it clear that any attempt to challenge your competence or seize assets will face immediate and full legal response. They'll know you are prepared and serious." I felt a surge of satisfaction. The tide was turning, albeit slowly. I was no longer on the defensive. I was ready to assert control, to show Ethan and Clara that intimidation would not work. That evening, I received an unexpected call from Ethan. "Dad," he said, voice measured but tense. "We should talk. We don't want to escalate this. Can we meet tomorrow?" I paused, weighing my options. This could be a trap, or an opportunity. I decided to keep my response neutral, cautious. "Tomorrow works," I said evenly. "Let's meet at the study. But understand this, Ethan, our conversation will be civil, but I will not compromise my independence." He hesitated, then said, "Understood." The call ended, and I sat back, reflecting on the delicate dance ahead. Every move would be scrutinized, every word analyzed. But I felt ready. For the first time since this ordeal began, I sensed the momentum shifting in my favor. I spent the rest of the evening reviewing potential scenarios. What if they tried to involve neighbors or friends? What if they used subtle psychological tactics to unsettle me? I wrote down every possible tactic and my counter-strategy, determined not to be caught off guard. As night fell over Maplewood, I walked through the mansion one last time, running my hand along the polished banister, the familiar paintings, the walls that had witnessed decades of my life. The house was more than an asset. It was a repository of memories, triumphs, and resilience. And I would fight to protect it. I made one last note in my journal, a personal vow: they may try every tactic, every trick. But I am prepared. I will not be intimidated. I will not be coerced. This house, my life, my legacy, they remain mine. And with that, I finally allowed myself a moment of calm, knowing that tomorrow would bring another encounter with Ethan and Clara, a confrontation that could test every ounce of my strategy, patience, and resolve. The morning sun spilled across the manicured lawn, but it did little to lift the heavy weight pressing on my chest. Today, I was meeting Ethan and Clara in the study. My mansion, usually a sanctuary of calm and order, felt like a battleground. I spent the early hours reviewing my notes and strategies once more. Samuel had advised me to remain calm, assertive, and precise in my statements. But as I stood in front of the large mirror in the hallway, adjusting my tie, I reminded myself, this wasn't just about appearances. It was about demonstrating competence, strength, and unshakable resolve. When the doorbell rang, my heart skipped a beat, though I quickly quelled it. Ethan and Clara entered with the same air of calculated confidence I had come to expect. Clara's sharp gaze scanned the room while Ethan's calm demeanor seemed almost unnerving. They carried themselves like people who believed they were already in control. "Good morning, Dad," Ethan said, voice even, carefully measured. "Morning," I replied, my tone equally steady. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit." They exchanged glances but complied. Clara's eyes narrowed slightly, almost imperceptibly, as if evaluating the room for hidden advantages. I gestured to the chairs opposite my desk. "I trust you understand why I wanted this meeting. I want to address concerns, yes, but I also want to be clear. Intimidation, threats, or ultimatums are not a way to communicate with me." Clara shifted in her seat. "Richard, this isn't intimidation. We're concerned about your well-being. That's why we thought it necessary to take certain measures." I leaned back, observing their expressions. "Ethan, Clara, I've seen the documents you sent. I understand your intentions. But there's a line between concern and control. And threatening to declare me incompetent crosses that line." Ethan spoke next, his voice calm but firm. "Dad, we're only looking out for you. We just want to ensure that your estate is managed responsibly. You have a lot to handle, and we're trying to help." I raised an eyebrow. "Help? Threatening me, telling me I'm not competent, or demanding my house, that isn't help. That's coercion." Clara leaned forward, her hands folded neatly on her lap. "Richard, we're not trying to coerce you. We just want to make sure everything is in order. Your decisions impact everyone, especially your family." I allowed a small, ironic smile. "Decisions impact everyone? Then perhaps you should focus on advising me, rather than trying to take control." Ethan's expression flickered, a brief sign of frustration. Clara, however, maintained her composure. "Dad, you know we care about you. But you have to admit that managing your estate, your house, finances, and medical decisions can be overwhelming. We just want to ensure nothing goes wrong." I let their words hang in the air for a moment. "I appreciate concern," I said slowly. But concern is different from threats. Your approach implies I'm incapable of making decisions for myself. That is insulting, and it's not how family should interact. Clara tilted her head slightly, her voice calm but insistent. Richard, we aren't questioning your intelligence. But people change. Even the most competent individuals can make mistakes or be vulnerable to manipulation. We're merely trying to prevent that. I leaned forward, fixing them with a steady gaze. And you believe the best way to prevent mistakes is to demand my house and threaten to declare me incompetent? That's your solution. Ethan opened his mouth, but hesitated. I could see the internal debate in his eyes. Part of him wanted to push harder, part of him recognized my unwavering stance. I continued, I've consulted my attorney, Samuel Griffin, and I've taken steps to ensure everything is in perfect order. My finances, my home, my medical records, they're all meticulously documented. Any attempt to challenge my competence will be met with full scrutiny. You need to understand that. Clara's fingers drummed lightly on the armrest of her chair, a subtle sign of impatience. Richard, we're not trying to fight you. We just want clarity. Maybe we can find a middle ground, something that reassures us without taking away your autonomy. I considered her words carefully. Middle ground? Let me be clear. My autonomy is not negotiable. Any attempt to control me under the guise of concern is unacceptable. However, I am willing to communicate openly and transparently about my decisions. That I can do. Ethan sighed. Dad, this doesn't have to be adversarial. We don't want to hurt you. He paused, searching for words. We just want to make sure everything is secure. That's all. I nodded slowly, letting the words sink in. I understand. And I appreciate your concern. But security does not come from threats. It comes from honesty, transparency, and respect. Clara's eyes softened, a rare glimpse of vulnerability. We're just scared, Richard. Scared of losing you or making the wrong decisions that could harm you. I leaned back, allowing the tension to ease slightly. I get it. Fear can make people act rashly. But fear doesn't justify coercion. You are my children, and I want you to care for me. But I also want you to trust me to manage my own life. There was a long pause as Ethan and Clara processed my words. Finally, Ethan spoke, voice quieter this time. We don't want to push you away, Dad. We just want to protect you. That's all we've ever wanted. I softened slightly, though I maintained my firmness. I know. But protection without respect is nothing but control. If you truly want to help me, you'll respect my decisions, even if you disagree. Clara exhaled, her posture relaxing. Maybe we went too far. Perhaps we let our concern cloud our judgment. We didn't mean to threaten you, we just acted out of fear. I nodded. I understand fear, I do. But you need to channel it into guidance, not ultimatums. If you want my cooperation, it has to be built on respect, not threats. Ethan rubbed his forehead, a sign of stress, then finally nodded. All right, Dad. We hear you. No more threats. We just want to be part of your decisions without taking over. I allowed a faint smile to appear. That's all I ask. Inclusion without coercion. Transparency without control. That is acceptable to me. Clara leaned back, exhaling slowly. We can do that. We'll work with you, not against you. For a brief moment, the tension lifted, replaced by a fragile truce. I knew, however, that this battle was far from over. Ethan and Clara's ambitions ran deep, and their methods could be subtle, insidious, and persistent. But for now, I had established one thing clearly. I was not to be intimidated. After they left, I sat in the study, letting the silence settle around me. The confrontation had been exhausting, both mentally and emotionally, but it was also empowering. I had asserted my authority, defended my autonomy, and made it clear that fear would not dictate my life. Samuel called later that evening to debrief. How did it go? He asked. I recounted the meeting, emphasizing the moments where I maintained control and set boundaries. Excellent, Samuel said. You held your ground without letting emotion cloud your judgment. That's crucial. They'll test you again, but now they know you're not an easy target. I exhaled, feeling a sense of accomplishment. It was intense. But I feel stronger for it. You should, Samuel replied. You demonstrated that age, experience, and intellect cannot be undermined by threats. You've set a precedent that will make future attempts far more difficult. As I prepared for bed, I reflected on the day's events. The confrontation had been tense, emotional, and revealing, but it had also clarified one thing. I was still in control of my life. Ethan and Clara might try again, in different ways, but they would always encounter the same unwavering determination. I closed my eyes, mentally rehearsing the next steps. Documentation, transparency, and calm assertiveness would continue to be my weapons. And I would not falter. The night settled over Maplewood, the mansion standing tall and silent, a fortress of both memories and resolve. And within its walls, I knew one truth that no threat, no ultimatum, and no attempt at manipulation could ever change. I was the master of my own destiny. The days after the confrontation passed in a tense, uneasy calm. Ethan and Clara's visits became more measured, their smiles slightly strained. They still carried the aura of authority, but the fire in their eyes had dimmed. They knew I wasn't a pushover. But I wasn't done either. If anything, the meeting had given me clarity. I had to be proactive, strategic, and unshakable. I couldn't let my children manipulate me, not subtly and not overtly. It was time to turn the tables. I spent the following morning in my private library, surrounded by towering shelves of books and carefully organized files. I reviewed every document, every financial record, every legal contract. I made a meticulous timeline of my assets, my decisions, and my medical history. This wasn't just for protection, it was a show of competence, a demonstration that every aspect of my life was under my control. Samuel Griffin had advised me to anticipate their moves. They'll test your limits, he had said. They'll try to find inconsistencies, gaps, anything that can be twisted into doubt. Your job is to leave no openings. Document everything, know everything, and maintain calm, always calm. I had taken his words to heart. I even created a small ledger of potential scenarios, each with detailed countermeasures. This was war, not of weapons, but of wills. And I intended to win. The next day, Clara called. Dad, we'd like to visit this afternoon. Nothing formal, just to check in. I agreed, of course. It was expected. But I also had a plan. By the time they arrived, I had prepared a subtle but deliberate setup. The study was arranged with all my files neatly displayed, charts and spreadsheets on the desk, a computer ready with my digital ledger open. It was not intimidation, it was a quiet display of capability. Ethan and Clara entered, exchanging a brief, almost imperceptible look. Clara's eyes swept over the room, noting the meticulous order. Ethan's calm facade remained, but his fingers fidgeted slightly on the armrest. Good afternoon, I greeted them, standing and extending a hand. They shook it politely, though their smiles were cautious. Clara broke the silence. Richard, everything all right? You seem prepared. I smiled faintly. Prepared for what? Just sharing some updates about the house, finances, and my plans. Nothing more. Ethan leaned forward slightly, curiosity flickering in his eyes. Updates. We weren't expecting a formal review. I gestured to the desk. I thought it might be useful to go through everything together. Transparency is always beneficial. Clara's eyebrows lifted, impressed despite herself. Richard, this is thorough. I nodded, keeping my tone casual, but inside I felt a surge of satisfaction. Every chart, every file, every document was evidence of my competence. There was no opening for challenge, no hint of vulnerability. We sat, and I began explaining, step by step, my financial strategies, estate plans, and future projects. I detailed investments, property management, and even my daily routines. I noticed their expressions shift. Ethan's composed demeanor faltered slightly when I mentioned minor adjustments he hadn't anticipated. Clara's lips pressed together as she flipped through a file, realizing there was nothing hidden, nothing to manipulate. This is impressive, Clara admitted, her voice quieter now, tinged with respect. We didn't realize you had organized everything this meticulously. I allowed a small, polite smile. I like to be prepared. It's not just about protecting myself, it's about clarity for everyone involved. Transparency prevents misunderstandings and conflicts. Ethan shifted, frowning slightly. Dad, it seems like you've thought of everything. But what if something unexpected happens? You know, unforeseen circumstances. I leaned back, my tone calm but firm. Ethan, unforeseen circumstances happen. That's why contingency plans exist. And yes, I have contingency plans for almost every scenario. But fear of the unknown does not justify threats or ultimatums. Clara exhaled slowly, visibly trying to collect herself. Richard, we just want to make sure you're protected. We've been scared that something could happen, and we wouldn't know how to handle it. I nodded. I understand fear. But fear should not drive decisions. Knowledge, preparation, and communication should. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then I decided it was time to press slightly, but subtly. If you truly want to protect me, then let's work together constructively. Ask questions, provide advice, but don't attempt to control. I'm willing to consider your input, but ultimate decisions remain mine. Ethan and Clara exchanged a glance, and I knew the message was sinking in. Their attempts at intimidation had failed, and now they were trying to recalibrate. Clara spoke first. Richard, I think we've been approaching this wrong. Maybe we need to take a step back and reassess how we communicate about these matters. I nodded. Exactly. Respectful collaboration works far better than threats. If you care about my well-being, then trust me to make decisions while offering guidance. Ethan's voice was quieter now, almost hesitant. Dad, we do trust you. Maybe we just didn't realize how forceful we were being. I leaned forward slightly. Your intentions are noted. But remember, competence is not defined by age, or by profession, or by family opinions. It is defined by actions, knowledge, and careful planning. And by that measure, I am competent. Completely. Clara's expression softened, a rare, almost apologetic tone entering her voice. Richard, we didn't mean to doubt you. I think we just got carried away. I allowed myself a small smile. Acknowledging that is a start. Now, let's focus on working together constructively. You'll find that cooperation is far more effective than control. The rest of the meeting passed in a calmer, more collaborative tone. I answered questions, clarified decisions, and even sought their advice in certain matters, not because I needed it, but to show that collaboration, not coercion, was productive. As they left, I felt a sense of quiet victory. Today, I had not only defended my autonomy but subtly shifted the power dynamic. They were still my children, still invested in their ambitions, but now they had to acknowledge that I was no easy target. Later that evening, Samuel called. So, how did it go? I recounted the meeting, emphasizing the calm, strategic approach I had taken. They were cautious, I said. They realize they can't bully me, and I subtly demonstrated competence. The power dynamic is shifting. Samuel chuckled softly. Good. That's exactly what I hoped. You're not only protecting yourself, you're teaching them a lesson about respect and boundaries. They may push again, but now they'll think twice. I felt a renewed sense of confidence. This wasn't just about my house or my estate. It was about asserting control over my life, my decisions, and my dignity. They might have thought they could intimidate me, but they were learning a harsh lesson. Richard Thompson was not to be underestimated. The next morning, I walked through the mansion, inspecting every room and file, mentally preparing for any potential moves they might make. I knew the battle wasn't over. Far from it. But now, I had momentum, strategy, and clarity. They had pushed, and I had responded not with anger, but with precision. Ethan and Clara would test me again. Perhaps with subtler tactics, perhaps with charm or persuasion. But they would face the same unwavering truth. I was in control, and no fear or manipulation would take that from me. And as the sun set over Maplewood, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns, I felt a quiet satisfaction. The game had begun, and I was already several moves ahead. The tension in Maplewood had shifted. I could feel it every time I walked through the halls of my mansion. It wasn't just the lingering echo of my children's ultimatum, it was the undercurrent of anticipation. Ethan and Clara were recalibrating their approach, and I knew they would not let go of their ambitions easily. But this time, I was ready. The morning began with a quiet phone call. It was from Samuel Griffin, my trusted lawyer and confidant. "Richard, I've been reviewing some documents you gave me. There are discrepancies that could be used against you if Ethan and Clara dig too deep. It's minor, but we should be proactive." I listened carefully, letting his words sink in. Discrepancies? In my records? Nothing major, but some old contracts and property titles could raise questions. It's probably a matter of clerical oversight, but they could try to twist it. I nodded. Understood. Let's make corrections immediately. I want everything airtight before they attempt any new strategy. Samuel reassured me, "I'll handle the legal side. You just focus on maintaining your composure." That afternoon, as I was reviewing the corrected documents, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting visitors, so I approached cautiously. To my mild surprise, it was Ethan alone. Clara wasn't with him. "Hello, Dad," Ethan said, his usual confident smile slightly forced. "Can we talk?" I gestured for him to sit. "Of course. What's on your mind?" He sat down, his posture unusually stiff. I noticed the subtle signs of anxiety in his eyes, a rare break in his composed demeanor. "Dad," he began, hesitating, "I think we may have overstepped last week. I wanted to speak to you privately, away from Clara, to clear some things up." I raised an eyebrow, leaning back. "Interesting. And why is it important to speak privately? Afraid of your partner's reaction?" He hesitated again, and I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. The vulnerability was barely perceptible, but it was there. "Maybe. Or maybe. I just wanted to be honest with you." I nodded slowly. "Honesty is always welcome, Ethan. What's troubling you?" He took a deep breath. "We've been trying to protect you, I admit. But in doing so, I may have been too forceful. I've been thinking a lot about our relationship, and I realize I need to respect your autonomy. I don't want to fight anymore." I studied him carefully. Was this sincerity or a calculated move? Ethan was intelligent, and I knew manipulation was never far from his mind. But his eyes, there was a hint of genuine concern. "Ethan, I appreciate your words," I said carefully. "But respect isn't just about words. It's about actions, boundaries, and recognizing competence. You need to demonstrate that consistently." He nodded. "I understand. And I want to try. I worry about you, Dad. We've been scared of losing you." The sincerity in his tone surprised me. Perhaps this confrontation was shifting not just my strategy, but theirs. But I had learned never to rely solely on appearances. "Concern is natural," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "But concern shouldn't translate into control or ultimatums. We can protect and care for each other without undermining one another." He shifted uncomfortably. "There's something else. Something about Clara." I raised an eyebrow. "Go on." He swallowed, as if weighing his next words carefully. "Clara, she's been pushing harder than me. I think she's worried about her own stake in the estate more than my safety or yours. I didn't want to say anything, but I think you should know." A flicker of curiosity passed through me. Clara's motives had always seemed layered, but this revelation hinted at a deeper ambition. "I see. And you're telling me this because—" "Because I want to be honest, and because I think you need to be prepared," Ethan said quietly. "She's intelligent, strategic. You can't underestimate her. I didn't want you blindsided." I leaned back, letting the weight of his words settle. Clara had always been sharp, but perhaps I had underestimated the lengths she would go. And if Ethan was admitting this, then the stakes were higher than I had anticipated. "Thank you for your honesty, Ethan," I said finally. "This gives me more clarity. And clarity is power." His shoulders relaxed slightly, and for a moment I thought the conversation had reached a turning point. But life, as I had learned, rarely allowed simple victories. Later that evening, I received a message from Clara. It was brief. "We need to meet tomorrow. Important. Alone." I read it carefully, noting the directness. Clara was planning her next move, and she wanted it separate from Ethan. My mind raced with possibilities, strategies, and contingencies. The next morning, I prepared meticulously. I ensured my study was organized, files and documents displayed strategically, and my ledger open on the desk. This meeting would not be a negotiation, it would be an examination of wills. Clara arrived promptly, her expression calm, composed, but her eyes betraying a hint of determination. "Richard," she said as she entered, "thank you for seeing me." "Of course," I replied, gesturing to the chair. "Shall we sit?" We sat, and for a moment, silence hung between us. I let her speak first, knowing that initial moves often reveal intent. "I wanted to apologize for last week," she began smoothly. "Ethan and we may have approached things aggressively. I realize now that my methods may have been counterproductive." I nodded slowly. Acknowledgement is the first step. But apologies alone do not restore trust or respect. Actions do. She smiled faintly. "Agreed. And I'm here to propose a more constructive approach. I want to collaborate, to protect you, and ensure that your wishes are followed." I studied her, careful not to reveal my inner calculations. Her words were diplomatic, but experience had taught me that subtle threats often hid behind diplomacy. "And how do you intend to ensure that, Clara?" I asked calmly. She leaned forward slightly. "By being transparent, sharing our plans, and communicating openly. No ultimatums, no hidden agendas. Just collaboration." I allowed a small smile. "That sounds promising. But I must admit, your reputation for strategy precedes you. I hope you understand that my cooperation requires absolute honesty." Clara's smile widened, but it was measured. "Understood, Richard. I wouldn't expect anything less." We spent the next hour discussing plans, contingencies, and shared responsibilities. I was careful to steer the conversation, ensuring that every point reinforced my authority and competence. Clara offered suggestions, but I guided each discussion, subtly demonstrating that while collaboration was welcome, control remained mine. As the meeting concluded, she stood, offering a handshake. "Thank you, Richard. I think this was productive." I shook her hand, holding her gaze. "It was. Remember, collaboration thrives on respect. Overreach, even with good intentions, undermines it." She nodded, leaving with a poised, deliberate stride. I closed the door and exhaled, a mixture of relief and satisfaction coursing through me. Today, I had not only defended my position but also gathered invaluable insights into Clara's mindset. That night, I reviewed the day's events with Samuel. "She's strategic, patient, and intelligent," I said. "But she underestimated my preparedness." Samuel nodded. "And you gained insight into both of them. Ethan's loyalty is conflicted, but he's honest. Clara's ambition is calculated, but she respects competence, if only subtly." I leaned back in my chair, the weight of strategy heavy on my mind. The battle was far from over. But now, I had clarity, control, and insight. Every move they made could be anticipated, countered, and documented. As I prepared for sleep, I realized something crucial. This was not just a battle over a house or an estate. It was a test of wills, intelligence, and respect. And I was ready to prove, decisively, that age, experience, and knowledge could withstand ambition, pressure, and fear. Tomorrow would bring the next move, the next test. And when it came, I would be ready, calm, collected, and several steps ahead. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of my study, but the warmth did little to calm the storm raging in my mind. Clara's meeting yesterday had been revealing, but there was still so much I didn't know. The uneasy truce I had established was fragile, and I knew both Ethan and Clara would be testing boundaries sooner rather than later. I had spent the night reviewing every document, ledger, and record connected to my estate. Every file held a clue, and every number told a story. But amidst the routine paperwork, one folder caught my attention, a thin, worn envelope labeled Maplewood Trust, 1989. I had almost overlooked it, tucked away behind newer files, but something compelled me to open it. Inside were documents I had not seen in decades, old deeds, financial statements, and letters referencing a hidden account associated with the house. My pulse quickened as I read through the details. The account was substantial, far larger than I had remembered, and, more importantly, tied to a clause I had drafted personally but never disclosed. It was a safeguard, a legal contingency that could ensure control over my assets no matter what manipulations occurred. I had created it in my younger years, a quiet insurance policy in case greed or ambition threatened my peace. But over time, I had forgotten it. Until now. My hands trembled slightly as I called Samuel. "You need to come over immediately. I found something significant." Within the hour, Samuel arrived, reviewing the documents with a meticulous eye I had come to trust. "Richard, this is extraordinary. This account, combined with the clause you drafted, could completely shift control in your favor. No one else knows about this, do they?" I shook my head. "No. This has been buried for years. It's time it came into play. But I need your advice. How do I proceed without provoking them too soon?" Samuel leaned back, thoughtful. "We proceed strategically. You can use this knowledge as leverage, but we need a plan. If Ethan or Clara catch wind of it too early, they'll push back harder. Timing is crucial." I nodded. "Understood. Let's prepare a framework. I want to be untouchable legally before we even hint at this." Over the next few days, I executed a careful plan. I updated records, ensured all legal documents were airtight, and even arranged discreet audits to ensure transparency. To the outside world, I appeared calm and cooperative, but inside, I felt a renewed sense of power. Meanwhile, Ethan's behavior shifted subtly. He became more cautious, occasionally questioning Clara's suggestions, almost as if my previous conversation had planted seeds of doubt. Clara, however, remained composed, her ambition simmering beneath a polished exterior. One afternoon, I received an unexpected visit from Julia, an old friend and confidant. She had been a close neighbor for years, a historian of sorts, who often unearthed forgotten details about Maplewood's past. "Richard," she said, settling into the armchair, "I've been digging into the history of your property, and I think there's more here than anyone realizes." I raised an eyebrow. "Go on." Julia leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. "The property has a long history of family disputes, secret trusts, and undisclosed beneficiaries. There's even mention of a hidden document, something that could affect ownership, if found." My heart skipped a beat. Could this be connected to the folder I had discovered? "Do you know where it might be?" She shook her head. "Not exactly. But the records hint that it's buried within the house itself. Hidden in a location only the original owner would know, perhaps a safe, a hidden compartment, or even a false wall." I felt a thrill of anticipation. This was it, the final piece of the puzzle. We need to find it. If this document exists, it could change everything. Julia nodded. "I'll help. But you have to be careful. Someone could be watching, and greed can make people unpredictable." That evening, after Ethan and Clara had left the mansion following a routine dinner, I began a systematic search. Every corner, every drawer, every hidden space was examined. Hours passed, and fatigue threatened to slow me, but determination fueled my persistence. Finally, in the old study, behind a sliding panel in the bookshelf, I found a small, metal box. My hands shook as I pried it open. Inside was a single envelope, yellowed with age, sealed with an old wax stamp bearing my initials. I carefully opened it. The contents were breathtaking, a fully executed legal document, naming me as the sole decision-maker for the house and all associated assets, with explicit instructions that no challenge could override my authority unless I was proven legally incapacitated. Additionally, the document referenced a hidden financial account, accessible only with a key stored in a secondary location, an old safety deposit box in a nearby bank. This was more than protection. This was power, the kind that could render ultimatums meaningless. I couldn't help but smile, a rare and satisfied smile that felt like triumph. "Samuel," I said, calling him immediately, "we've just found the linchpin. Everything else falls into place now." When Samuel arrived, he reviewed the document with awe. "Richard, this is airtight. With this, Ethan and Clara can't make a move without your consent. You're untouchable legally, and they won't even see it coming." I nodded. Then it's time to plan the next step. I want to confront them strategically, making them aware that their tactics are futile, but not revealing the full extent yet. I want them to understand that the game has changed. Over the next week, I carefully orchestrated interactions with my children. Ethan remained cautious, often glancing toward Clara as if trying to gauge her reaction. Clara, on the other hand, continued her poised, composed routine, but I noticed the subtle changes, slight hesitation, small miscalculations in timing, hints of frustration. One evening, I invited both Ethan and Clara for dinner. The atmosphere was cordial but tense, every word measured, every glance significant. "Richard," Clara began, her voice smooth, "we've been thinking, maybe we approach things too aggressively. Perhaps there's a better way forward, with cooperation and transparency." I smiled faintly. Indeed, cooperation and transparency are essential. But respect is non-negotiable. That is the foundation. Ethan nodded, looking at me with a mixture of relief and uncertainty. "We understand, Dad. We just want what's best for you." I leaned forward slightly. "And I appreciate that. But let's make one thing clear. Control over my estate, my decisions, and my life is mine alone. Any attempt to undermine that will be futile." Clara's composure faltered just slightly, a fleeting expression quickly masked. Ethan noticed, but he didn't comment. The message had been delivered. After dinner, as they departed, I knew the game had shifted. The hidden document and account gave me leverage I had never possessed before. I could protect my assets, assert my autonomy, and strategically manage my children's ambitions without confrontation escalating into conflict. That night, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. Fear, manipulation, and ultimatums had tested my patience and resolve, but they had also revealed weaknesses in others, giving me insight into their character. I realized something profound. Power wasn't about wealth alone. It wasn't about legal documents or financial accounts. True power came from knowledge, foresight, and the ability to anticipate others' moves while maintaining composure. With the hidden document and account, I had not only preserved my assets but reclaimed authority over my life in a way that no threat could erode. And yet, I knew the challenges were far from over. Clara's ambition would not fade easily, and Ethan's loyalty remained conflicted. But now, armed with secrets, leverage, and clarity, I was ready for whatever came next. Maplewood Mansion, silent under the moonlight, felt like a fortress of both history and strategy. I had unearthed the hidden truth, but the final moves were yet to be played. And when they were, I would be ready, calm, calculated, and several steps ahead of everyone else. The air in Maplewood Mansion felt electric that morning. Sunlight streamed through the ornate windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors, but I barely noticed. My mind was occupied with the next move, the final confrontation, and the culmination of months of strategy. Ethan and Clara were scheduled to visit that afternoon under the guise of a casual family meeting. In truth, I had orchestrated this encounter to reveal the truth in a way that would leave them stunned, yet powerless. As I sat in the study, reviewing the hidden document and the details of the secret account, Samuel joined me, his expression a mixture of admiration and excitement. "This is it, Richard," he said. "Everything leads to this. Once you reveal the cards, there's no turning back." I nodded, feeling a rare mixture of calm and exhilaration. "I know. But it has to be done with precision. No emotional mistakes. They must understand that the game has changed, but they must not feel humiliated. They'll only become more dangerous if they do." Samuel smiled. "You've mastered the art of strategy. Let's make sure this is airtight." By the time Ethan and Clara arrived, I had everything in place. The hidden document rested in front of me on the polished oak table, along with the key to the secret account tucked discreetly in my pocket. Everything else was a performance. My demeanor calm, my words measured, my smile unreadable. "Richard," Clara began, her tone carefully neutral, "we wanted to discuss the house, and ensure everything is in order. We don't want any conflicts." I gestured toward the chairs. "Please, sit. Let's discuss this openly. Transparency is key, after all." Ethan and Clara sat, exchanging subtle glances. There was tension, yes, but also a flicker of curiosity, a silent recognition that something had shifted. "I have something to share," I began, keeping my voice steady. Something I discovered recently that changes the nature of our conversations about Maplewood Mansion and my estate. Clara's eyes narrowed slightly. Ethan leaned forward, suddenly attentive. I opened the hidden document and laid it carefully on the table. This document has been in my possession for decades, unknown to anyone but myself. It ensures that control of this house, and all associated assets, remains solely with me, unless I am legally proven incompetent. Furthermore, it references a secret financial account, fully funded and accessible only with a key that I have, which guarantees that my decisions cannot be overridden. I watched their faces as the realization dawned. Clara's composed exterior faltered, her lips tightening. Ethan's brow furrowed, a mixture of surprise and unease evident in his expression. This can't be," Clara began, her voice wavering slightly, though she quickly regained composure. How did you? I smiled faintly. It was always here. I simply rediscovered it. And now, it ensures that any threats, ultimatums, or attempts to declare me incompetent are futile. Ethan remained silent, processing the revelation. Clara, however, tried to assert control. "Richard, surely there must be some loophole. No legal document is absolute. This doesn't mean we can't challenge." I raised a hand, interrupting her. "Clara, I suggest caution. Every clause, every condition, every stipulation has been reviewed and confirmed by legal experts. Any attempt to challenge it will not only fail but will expose actions that could be construed as coercive or manipulative. In short, the law is on my side." The silence that followed was heavy, punctuated only by the ticking of the antique clock. Clara's jaw tightened. Ethan's hands rested tensely on his knees. Samuel, standing discreetly behind me, gave a subtle nod. I knew he was ready to intervene if needed, but the moment called for psychological strategy more than legal reinforcement. "I want to make something clear," I continued. "This isn't about wealth. It's about respect, autonomy, and integrity. My decisions regarding this house, and my life, are mine alone. That is non-negotiable." Clara's composure finally cracked. Her voice sharpened, but with a hint of desperation. "You can't just sideline us like this. We have interests here. We're your family." I leaned forward slightly, maintaining a calm, unwavering gaze. "And as family, I want transparency, cooperation, and honesty. But ultimatums, manipulation, or threats are unacceptable. The time for games is over. From this moment forward, all actions must be respectful and within the bounds of trust and legality." Ethan, finally finding his voice, spoke cautiously. "Dad, we just wanted to make sure you're protected. We didn't want anyone to take advantage of you." I nodded. "I appreciate that, Ethan. But the way to protect someone is not through coercion or fear, it's through respect and understanding. I hope you both understand that now." Clara's eyes glimmered with frustration, but there was also a flicker of resignation. The realization that her manipulations were ineffective, that her ambition could not override my authority, weighed heavily. I reached into my pocket and held up the key to the secret account. "This is the final safeguard. It ensures that all financial matters are secure and cannot be manipulated. It is a symbol of control, yes, but also of trust. I have ensured that everything is above board, transparent, and fair. The house, the assets, and the estate are protected, and any actions must respect that fact." For the first time, Clara's mask fully slipped. She looked at me, not with the calculated poise she always maintained, but with raw, unfiltered emotion, a mixture of anger, fear, and disbelief. Ethan reached out, placing a hand gently on her arm. "Clara, we can't fight this. Dad's decisions are final." Clara recoiled slightly but then nodded, a reluctant acknowledgement. "Fine," she said, her voice tight, controlled, but tinged with defeat. I leaned back in my chair, letting the tension dissipate slightly. The room was quiet, save for the soft ticking of the clock. The confrontation had been decisive, but it had been conducted with precision. No unnecessary humiliation, no rash words, no escalation. Just facts, authority, and strategy. "That concludes our discussion," I said. "Moving forward, all interactions regarding the estate will be conducted with transparency, respect, and legality. Any deviation from this standard will be met with appropriate measures, as outlined in the documents I've shared. Ethan and Clara remained seated for a moment, processing the new reality. Finally, they rose, and Clara offered a stiff, almost formal, nod. Ethan's expression was one of relief mixed with lingering concern. As they departed, I felt a wave of calm wash over me. For the first time in months, the pressure had lifted. Maplewood Mansion felt like a fortress not only of stone and history but of strategy, knowledge, and authority. I had reclaimed control, protected my legacy, and ensured that my autonomy was untouchable. Later that evening, as the sun set over the estate, Samuel and I sat in the study, reflecting on the events of the day. "You did it, Richard," Samuel said, admiration in his voice. "You protected yourself and the estate without a single misstep. This was a masterclass in strategy." I smiled, feeling a sense of satisfaction that went beyond mere victory. "It wasn't just strategy," I said. "It was foresight, patience, and understanding human nature. That's the real lesson here." Samuel nodded. "And Clara and Ethan, they'll think twice before testing boundaries again. You've not only secured your assets but also established a precedent for respect and authority." I leaned back, looking out the window at the sprawling grounds of Maplewood Mansion. The estate had survived threats, manipulation, and greed, and now, under my guidance, it would continue to thrive. In that moment, I realized something profound. The true value of wealth is not measured by dollars or assets but by the ability to maintain control, ensure fairness, and protect what matters most. Maplewood Mansion was more than a house. It was a legacy, a symbol of resilience, and a testament to the power of knowledge and strategic foresight. And as night fell over the estate, I felt a quiet triumph. The game had ended, the moves had been played, and I had emerged victorious, not through force, but through wisdom, patience, and calculated action. Maplewood Mansion was secure, and so was my peace. The story that began with ultimatums, threats, and tension had reached its conclusion, with lessons learned, boundaries respected, and authority restored. I smiled, knowing that the future, while uncertain, was mine to shape. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. The ultimate showdown is over. Richard uncovers the hidden document, outsmarts manipulative family members, and secures his legacy. Don't miss the shocking conclusion to this gripping story. Subscribe, like, and turn on notifications to join us for more unbelievable tales of strategy, secrets, and triumph.